You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 18, Lost Siblings Found with Mark Isaacs. This episode of the Word Slinger Podcast is brought to you by Happy Pants Books. If you're a coach, consultant, or keynote speaker and need to publish or perish, get your ideas out of your head and on the page at happypantsbooks.com.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tumlinson, the Word Slinger. And hey, it's great to have you here this morning. It's great to be here this morning. This has been, wow, a fantastic week. It's Friday morning right now for me. It's Houston, cold. Wow, I don't even know what to think about that. It's like 30. It's in the 30s. It's like 36 or so right now, and rainy. And even here in the Word Slinger closet, I'm a little chilly. So, kind of wish I'd snuck in a jacket or something. Anyway, today I've got a great interview with a very good friend of mine. Actually, he and I go way back, and that's my friend Mark Isaacs. And he is, he's an actor, actually, among other things. He's done quite a bit. When I met him, we were both copywriters at an ad agency, and for a brief time, we actually had a little production company together. But he focuses, his entire career is focused on acting, and that's great. And I'm glad that we can get that story. But there's another story that comes from Mark's life that's so fascinating that I had to talk to him about it, and I'm glad that he was willing to open up about it on air, especially since it's so bizarre how all this came about. But I'm going to let you hear that whole story in a second. I did want to preface this, though, with when I talked to him, and this was a few weeks ago, actually, our time, but when I first did this interview, we were aiming everyone at his GoFundMe page, and that's no longer the case. So you'll probably hear that in the recording as a sort of go-to where you can learn more. You may still be able to learn more there, but please just kind of disregard that. He asked me to, and I could spend some time trying to edit out, but there were complications. So I'm just going to ask, and we'll all be on our honor. And I don't want to complicate anybody's life any further, but if you could just ignore that, and I won't put that in the show notes or anything. So there won't be a way for you to just click through. So, but that's pretty much the only limitation on this one. And you get to hear some about my good friend, some about his career. But we're mostly going to talk about these siblings that he found, that found him, really, through services in Canada. So, fascinating story. It's really, really bizarre, really cool. So I hope you like it. I hope you find it inspirational. And, as someone who has, I have my own stories about finding lost siblings and lost parents, people I never knew. I only met my father, my real father, in 2010, and my real sister, my only sister, I met her shortly before that, same year, but shortly before meeting my father. So, I've got siblings out there, some of which I've never even met. So, fascinating stories, for me at least. I think they'll be fascinating for you. They're very inspirational, and I hope you enjoy this episode with my good friend, Mark Isaacs. Hey everybody, this is Kevin, and I'm here with my really good friend Mark Isaacs, who I've known for quite a few years now. He is among other things, he's an actor. You can see a lot of his work. You can actually check him out on IMDb. He's one of my 3 or 4 friends who actually have an IMDb page, which is kind of cool. And we've done some work together in the past, all kinds of projects actually, right, Mark? I mean, we've done video and other projects together in the past, right?
Yeah, that's right. We've done some documentary film and some commercials and a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And now, though, you've got a whole new adventure. It's an interesting story. It's really cool. I'm gonna let you tell all the details of that. But this is Mark Isaacs, and today we're gonna cover a little bit of story, a sort of a personal story. I think everybody will like. So, Mark, why don't you first, tell me a little about you and I have known each other for a few years now. We met as copywriters at an ad agency. But we're not going to talk about your work. We're actually going to talk about something a little closer to home. Why don't you give me sort of the background of what's going on with you right now?
Well, when I was born, my mom was, married to my father, and that relationship didn't last long. They were divorced by the time I was less than two. So I don't remember meeting him. I don't remember anything about him. But he went on to have a lot more kids.
Yeah.
And in addition to my brother and I, who were born in the same year, so he went on to have. I know of two in Buffalo, New York, and I knew of four in Central New York. But I found out about all of them, those six, when I was an adult, and so I had an awareness that he had other families, like would normally happen. He would, people have two or three families, and if there's divorce involved and remarriage, there's a lot of other potential for kids. But what I found out in September just was mind blowing, because I assumed I knew about all the kids that he had, and the youngest ones that were full grown.
Right.
And then on September 15th, I was looking at my Facebook acting page of all things, and I got a message from a social worker in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who basically informed me that I had siblings there, half siblings as he called them, who were in foster care, and it was confusing. It was mind-boggling. It was it was a very strange emotion to be feeling, that to find out that there's people out there linked to me that I didn't know anything about, and they're young. They were very young. I mean, when they went to foster care 3 years ago, I think the oldest one was maybe 9 years old.
Wow.
So yeah, so I found out about them, and we ended up corresponding back and forth for a couple of months, and I didn't get a whole lot of details. I didn't really get their names, didn't get any photos. I mean, the correspondence was pretty strictly, I'm trying to think how to say this, like legally related. Like they were trying to establish a connection with me, or a connection with any family member with my last name, who could help them find permanency for these kids. So it was more or less a conversation like, hey, can you help us find family? You might be willing to adopt them or facilitate them being adopted here in Canada.
Right.
So that was basically the conversation for the first couple of months. Go ahead.
No. You recently you went to meet these kids recently, right? Or well, before we get to that, I mean, there was more to that story. I mean, you talked to this guy in Canada for a while, and you were starting to get details like. So, how many brothers and sisters did you find out you had?
Okay, so in Calgary, I have seven, and that is the two oldest are girls, the two next are boys, the next two after that are boys, and the last one's a boy. And the reason I split them up like that, when I'm mentioning now, is that they're in different foster homes. So among the seven in Calgary, they're in four foster homes. And the good thing is the older four are still connected nicely, because they're all in the same school. Their ages 8 to 12, so they're all in the same school, which is very helpful. But there's, in addition to those seven, there's also two infants, or I should say an infant and a toddler, in Ontario, Canada. So there's now really 9 of these half siblings that I have that I'm getting to know, but one point I was going to make to you is that the part of the complications in this process is, one of them is that these kids, I think a number of them were born without having their births registered, which means they have no birth certificates. And I was told that I think 5 of them were born in California. So the way I understand it now is that the social workers have communicated to me there's a legal team in place in California that's working on getting birth certificates. So imagine being born, you know, a decade ago or sometime around there, and just having no record of your birth. I mean, you
Right.
really, in some ways, you really have no identity when it comes to anything legal. So that's one of the, I think one of the big hiccups in this situation is that I don't know that they can be adopted without having a birth certificate.
Right.
I think that's a critical piece of information, a piece of paper. So that may be holding up the situation of getting a number of them adopted. So that's kind of a big deal right now. But they all, you know, when I did get to see them, I saw them for 4 days. I had the good fortune of going up to Calgary and visiting with them, and spent a lot of time with the older four, which makes sense because they were, you know, they're much more independent, and they're much more, you know, they're bonded themselves, and so we did all kinds of stuff, and we got to know each other really well. I saw the two girls play volleyball. We went to the zoo. We went to a great science center in Calgary. We went to go see a movie. We went swimming. We did all kinds of, you know, fun sibling-like stuff. Although, you know, I'm old enough to be their parent, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they're around my daughter's age. So that was an interesting dynamic to be around them. In fact, on the Sunday I was there, the Sunday visit is a visit for all 7 kids. So that's when all 7 kids get to see each other once a week and spend a few hours together. And some of the younger boys insisted that I play laser tag. So it was me, and not all 7 of them played. The youngest boy didn't play, but the other 6 and me were all on one team, playing laser tag and winning 2 games. And I was feeling very, very proud for the Isaacs family in that moment that we were all bonded over laser tag.
Yeah. So I'm really curious though how this really came up. Like, how do you get to a situation where, you know, you've got all these kids born and there are no birth certificates, there's no records. Like, what brought that around?
Well, the way that it was explained to me is that the father I share with them, the biological father I share with them, had these children with 2 different mothers, and they're calling themselves surrogate mothers. Meaning, I don't think there's a relationship I don't think there's a romantic relationship between the father and these mothers. Like, I think they were having these children for whatever reasons, but they weren't, and they were raising them in the same house. But it wasn't like he was living, from the way I've heard it explained, it wasn't like he was living in a polygamist relationship.
Yeah.
You know? So I believe that these were, you know, either home births that just weren't registered. I know in one case that one of the mothers had a child and left the hospital in Canada the very next day, and this was all preceding the seizure of the kids by Child and Family Services. So I guess there's a sense that they were attempting to live an independent life, perhaps off the grid in some way, or, you know, by a new set of rules. A key thing to note in this story, though, is that, and this is a pretty big deal, is that my biological father is Mohawk, and so being of Aboriginal heritage in Canada, these kids are entitled to be registered through what is, I think now, it's Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, and so they could actually get a status card as being Mohawk and be registered with a tribe in Canada, and so that'll be part of the paperwork that we end up doing. But there's some conversation that I've heard about, basically from the parents in the situation, because one of them did a long radio interview in Canada, and there's been some websites that they created that they were claiming that the Canadian government seized these kids unlawfully. And this is where this is where the whole story just sort of takes on a whole other dimension that I think people may have trouble digesting, is that one of the mothers said that because the father is, she says, targeted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, as for his political views, we'll say that, his political views, which may be called anti-government. She says that they were targeted. So the kids were basically taken in retribution for his beliefs and his acts. So whether that actually is true or not, it's an interesting aspect to this. I mean, it injects a very political a very political dynamic to a story that just started out about some kids that were in foster care.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't. You've inherited something kind of gnarled and not easily untangled. It seems.
Yeah, and navigating that's interesting because I don't have any contact with at this point. I don't have any contact with the parents. I'm not really in touch with them. I've not really heard from them. So it's not like we're having a conversation about what's going on. And so, and also to protect the kids' privacy, I don't mention their names. I don't post any photos of them. They're in foster care, so we're protecting them as best we can. But the idea is that I think this story drawing attention from people. I think that people are very interested in the fact that I think first and foremost that we actually like discovered each other. Like they discovered they have an older brother. I discovered I have younger brothers and sisters, and there's this instant family connection. And I think that's kind of the fuel for the whole experience. Is that when I tell people, like when I was in Calgary, and people would say, "What brings you to Calgary?" I'd be honest and say, "Okay, I just found out 2 months ago I have 7 half siblings that I didn't even know existed."
Yeah.
And just to see the look on their face is like we all have a family story. We all have multiple family stories.
Yeah.
And to see that look on their face register, like, really? Like, this is phenomenal. This is an extraordinary type of thing. And it was interesting for me to start telling them about it because I was experiencing it and in real time and then trying to share that experience with what was going on. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's bizarre, is what it is. This is the kind of thing that you might see this on like a Lifetime movie or something. Actually, better than that. I mean, you might see this on the big screen at some point or some sort of documentary, but you never expect to know someone who's going through something weird like this.
Well, I assume that, and you and I have had personal conversations in the past about family. I assume that we all have, multiple family stories based on how we were brought into the world, who raised us, and then who claimed us once we were adults. And it could be all the same people. For some people, it's consistent all the way through. But for people like you and I, it's a little bit different. Where I was brought into the world by one set of parents, and then I was raised by, my mother and a different father, and my family connections with those two people were very different. With my mom's family, we were very close. With the father who raised me, we were, I think, especially when I was in my formative years, very detached. I didn't feel connected to that family. And then I had the missing family. I had the missing Isaacs family that I didn't know about until I was into my adult years. And see, that's another, when you talk about a movie, that's another part of this story that lends itself to a film because I didn't meet the Isaacs family until I was 25.
Yeah.
And so I went more than about 2 decades or so without having any clue. It was just me and my older brother were the only Isaacs I knew. I didn't know any other Isaacs. I knew they were in Buffalo, New York. I didn't know what they looked like. I didn't know their names. I really knew nothing. I was completely kept in the dark. And so I think that's one of the things that inspired me when I got this message on Facebook from the social worker. That was the thing that just sparked me to say, I need to call back now. I remember being a kid and not having a family connection to this family and not having any idea where to start. And I told the social workers that was important to me, that these kids who've been in foster care for 3 years need to know they belong to somebody and somebody belongs to them and they're entitled to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing that you and I have talked about this before, and you pointed out to me that they came to you through your acting profile page on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Which is bizarre. I wonder why, though. I wonder why they found you through that and not through like your personal page. I mean, how long have they been looking?
Well, that's a great question, and I haven't actually asked that because I get the sense that my Facebook page, I think you can find it. My personal page, I think you have to be a friend to find it. I think my settings are you have to be a friend to find it.
I see.
But my acting page is open to the public. But that's a great question that you asked. That I don't know how long they were looking because it could have been, for a year before they found me. It could have been a lot longer. I guess I never really thought to ask that question. And now that you brought that up, now I want to know was this a long time coming? Because it's not like you couldn't Google Mark Isaacs with my spelling and find links to pretty much everything I've done.
Yeah.
With the exception of you may find links to a British documentary filmmaker also named Mark Isaacs, who's celebrated in the UK. But you pretty much figure out pretty fast that that's not me.
So, what's interesting though is that it smacks of this is a last ditch attempt to contact people. You know what I mean? Like we're down to not that this is going to sound bad, but we're down to the dregs. We're down to the bottom of the barrel. We haven't had any luck contacting anybody, and here's one last attempt. Like there's this guy's acting page. Like how'd they even know that you were related?
Well, I'm actually registered, or I was registered with what was Indian and Northern Affairs in Canada. Because my father's Mohawk, I was able to register even here in Texas, able to register more than a decade ago. In fact, I'm going through that registration process again now because since I've last registered and that expired, they have a new certificate. They have a new what's called a secured certificate of Indian status in Canada. So I'm actually in the midst of applying for that now, and actually applying on my behalf of my daughter as well. So because I was registered and Mohawk Family Services had my name in Ontario, that's where they got my name. They got my name as being a connection to this family, and that's how they were on the trail to finding me.
Yeah.
But you just made me think of something in that. So when I called Calgary on September 15th after receiving this Facebook message, I didn't call the guy's number. I didn't call the direct number. I said I'm gonna Google the office number. I'm gonna call this number and talk to somebody else and confirm this is somebody real. This is not a hoax. And the woman I spoke to confirmed everything. She said that there is a guy by that name. That is his direct line. This is the case he's working on. And that was Tuesday, September 15th in the evening. He didn't call me back until Friday late morning. And when he called me back, he said, I'll be honest, I didn't expect you to respond to me at all. Yeah. He said, I've had such an issue with this family getting anyone to comply, anyone to help, anyone to offer assistance to help me put together a family tree for the kids or find some permanency in regards to homes, family connections. I think they were, like you were describing, pretty much at a dead end. Yeah. And so when I responded back with this big response of, yeah, I mean, I'm interested, I think he was very moved. In fact, when I talked to him for about an hour and a half on Friday, September 18th, he said, I don't have a script. I'm just kind of making this up as I go and trying to tell you what I can tell you and fill in the blanks. And it was such a moving conversation because the things he told me were heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was just, it sounded like these kids were living in a very unconventional lifestyle, and they weren't going to school. I had a sense they weren't going to see doctors. Mm-hmm. They weren't going to see dentists. I mean, they were really living kind of wild lives, and in a home that was described as being far less than favorable for being a good environment for kids. So I'm hearing all these details and thinking, this is terrible. I mean, this is a terrible thing. Plus, they've been in foster care for 3 years. It took them 3 years to find me, so it was a moving conversation, and I didn't even know what to do at that point. I'm like, whatever you need, whatever I can do, I want to do, and it was one of those things where you think there's something else out there in your life that's gonna come along, it's gonna step on your path, and for some of it's meeting the love of our life, or it's going to a faraway land. And
yeah.
Little did I know that these people were already born and living and connected to me, and I just had no idea. I had no clue they were out there.
Yeah. So what now? I mean, you went to Canada. Why don't you tell us a little about that? I mean, you tell us a little about the trip.
Well, you kind of build up. I'll say this much: you build up in your mind that it's going to be spectacular.
Yeah.
Like the excitement and everything sort of just builds up that I expected to see fireworks. I expected a band to come out and start playing music as I met the kids, and it wasn't like that at all. And that was a good thing. But in my mind, I'm sort of imagining this monumental moment, this life-altering moment, and it really kind of was quiet because when I met the older four, the social worker who's working on the permanency aspect of this brought me to the volleyball tournament where the two oldest, who are girls, the two oldest are playing. And so we walk in, and I'm scanning this large group of girls who were sitting on the floor in a big circle and trying to pinpoint which ones are mine. And based on the photos I've seen, and I've only seen at that point, I only seen them in a handful of photos the week before.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really I didn't see a lot of photos of them at that point. So one of the boys came over first, and then I believe the other boy came over, and then one of the girls came over, and then the oldest girl came over last. And it was just a quiet, like, peaceful moment. It was instant connection. I mean, the whole experience was instant connection, and it was very different than I imagined. Like I imagined, like I said, I imagined this in my mind, it's this big, display of fireworks and huge emotions, and it wasn't huge. It was just peaceful and calm, and I felt connected right from the start. And that whole evening, watching the girls play volleyball, and then the group of us went out, their foster dad and their foster sisters, and all of us, the four of us, went out to, or the five of us, went out to get some hamburgers and root beer after that. And it was like a nice, simple, we're connected type of situation. It wasn't awkward. Nobody was awkward. Nobody was strange. I think the only maybe awkwardness might have been when I was cheering very loudly for my sisters playing volleyball, and they were, getting a little red faced if, they realized I'm loudly cheering, go number one. And, my sister is looking at me like, I can tell she's like, really? Like, are you trying to embarrass me? But that was probably more of a typical, reaction of a kid that age. But yeah, the rest of that first encounter, and then the next day, I met the next two youngest boys, and they're in a different home, and I met their foster family, and they're sweet people. The foster father said they're from El Salvador. They've been, I think, in Canada for 20 to 30 years. Those boys have a foster sister who's 20, who's very doting, very helpful. We met at a restaurant, an Italian restaurant, had lunch with them, and they were, doing their thing as a 4 and 7-year-old would be at a restaurant. And you've got young ones in your family, so you understand, like, you see them at, coloring their paper, and they're, drinking their drink. And then by the end of the meal, like, they were excited to sit on my lap. They wanted to look at pictures on my phone of me with the other kids, with the older four. And so that wasn't awkward either. The only difference for me with that one is that relating to them was a bit different because they were much younger. They weren't necessarily as vocal. I don't know how much they were told about who I was. Yeah. And so I didn't want to overstep boundaries. I wanted to be very respectful of the family and of the kids. And then on that Sunday, I met the seventh one, the youngest one, and he was it was a bit standoffish. He was definitely a little shy around me. But what I found interesting about him is that, do you remember the movie Zoolander?
Yeah.
Okay, so every time I would take a picture of the youngest boy, he would like basically do like
blue steel.
Yes, he gave me this blue steel look, and I'll have to send you this photo to show you. But it was a blue steel look of like I'm a male model, every time. And the thing is, he is so pretty. Like, these kids, they're just darling kids. But he's so not handsome. He's like a pretty child at 3. So that was a little different. But then again, he's so much younger. So of the 7 there, I really bonded very well with the older 4. And then I had the opportunity a few days later, after getting back to Houston, to Skype with a 1 and 2-year-old in Ontario. And that was a little interesting because I didn't know how long that was going to last. I didn't know how it was going to play out. But the girls there were very interested in seeing me. I kind of did my some little shtick with grabbing one of my daughter's, stuffed rabbits, and playing with that, and holding up a magazine so the 2-year-old could identify letters for me. And I kept them engaged for, quite a long time. I was kind of impressed. I think their foster mom was impressed with how long I kept them entertained. But I have a daughter, and I've been around kids for a long time, so Skyping with them was fun, and we'll actually do some regular Skyping with the other kids in Calgary as well. So I think that right now the next step is to stay in touch, to stay acquainted. One of the girls in Calgary has been sending me emails and letting me know what's going on there. And like for example, yesterday she was on a field trip. She said she would send me photos of the field trip. So the communication aspect I think is really key. That I just that it grows stronger and we stay in touch and we stay connected that way. I do want to go back as many times as I can. I'd love to get some work in Calgary and Ontario for that matter, and go see the kids firsthand. The social workers are also talking about having all of us together, meaning the 7 in Calgary, the 2 in Ontario, me, my brother who's in Arizona, and my daughter, like having all of us gather in Calgary at some point and have like a big sibling connected, event, some kind of reunion, I suppose. And my daughter would definitely be invited because the social workers know about her and they know that she wants to meet the kids as well. And of course, she's the age of a lot of them. We're close to it, close to their age. So yeah, like the next steps really are like continuing the communication and getting back up there to see them. The adoption process, is very much on my mind. How where they could go, who might end up adopting them. Could they be adopted easily in the U.S. since they're Canadian residents, but they were like I think the older 5 were born in the U.S. Like, could they be adopted easily? So that's a question that I want to have answered. I'd like to see them all go to the same home. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be possible. I think there's already kind of plans for a couple of them to go to a home in one U.S. state where they've got a relative who they're already acquainted with. A couple of the kids may go to one particular relative, but yeah, that would leave. I mean, that would leave the 7 others who could conceivably be adopted by one family. And heck, that would be a reality show. Right there is adopting 7 kids, especially if it's a couple who doesn't have any kids, or it's a couple who has grown children, or it's a couple who also already has 1 or 2 little ones. So I think it's kind of wide open, but I do get the sense that they're trying to expedite this. Like, they're really eager to find quality candidates who would make this possible. Another thing to keep in mind with this is that since they're a Mohawk and they're the way they were raised, is these boys all have long hair. And that created some interesting situations, especially the day we all 7 of them got together with me. People noticed their long hair, and they were mistaken on many occasions for girls. In fact, I was with one of the little ones, the 7-year-old, and he was trying to get cotton candy out of the vending machine. And everything there is a card. Like, you use these little, like, it's like a debit card. You swipe the card. So he's swiping, and it's not working. The cotton candy's not coming out. And there's a mother with her daughter behind us, and she says, "Well, honey, I don't think the machine works. That little girl tried it." And my first instinct was to correct. And then I got to the point really quickly. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I'll let people figure that out for themselves. These boys are unique. I don't want them to feel any pressure that they need to cut their hair. If they want to have their hair long, by all means, they're entitled to do that. So that's another interesting aspect of this is making sure that they've got strong self-esteem and making sure that they feel good about themselves, especially since they've had a disconnect from family and that they've been raised by loving but temporary foster families. So I want to make sure that they know that they're okay, and they're okay to do the things that are important to them.
So the foster families are temporary. Is there any idea of making that permanent?
I think I was told that there's one particular foster family who's caring for a portion of the kids, who's expressing some interest in and maybe adopting all 7. But I don't know that. I mean, it was a conversation I had with the social workers when I got up there on the first day of my visit. But I don't know how. How far that's progressed. I don't know how what needs to happen in order for that to fall into place. So it's at least one possibility. To have 7 of the 9 be in one place, but But again, I don't know if it hinges on them getting the birth certificates of the kids finalized or what. But I'm happy that there's at least one option. I know that I'm sure there's more, and um, I'm sure that once the birth certificates are there, and I can help facilitate them getting both registered in Canada and getting passports, so they could travel on both sides of the border. It would be great to have them meet some people here. I'd love to bring especially the older four. I'd love to bring them to Texas. I'd love to have them visit, see people here, take them to the rodeo and take them to see the Astros and Johnson Space Center and all these fun things that we've got in Southeast Texas, and maybe take them to the Hill Country and that sort of thing, and meet people, meet people firsthand and get a sense of you get a sense of their personalities, get a sense of who they really are. Because I'm only talking about them in the most the slightest of ways, because I can't get into too many details, but I'd love to see them stay as a family unit and go somewhere that they're accessible to me.
Yeah.
And that they're in a loving family environment that is permanent, that's stable, and that's going to be there for the duration of their growing up.
Yeah. I'm actually getting my own voice back. I don't know if you have headphones on or what.
I do not have headphones.
All right, so to the listeners, you get to hear me twice, lucky you. And it's completely distracting me from what I was going to ask, but so now that you've been there, and now that you're oh, thank you, that cut it out. I don't know what you did. Now that you've been there, you guys are still working on the logistics of what happens next. I get that. So what about for you personally? I mean, what's your plan? I mean, I know you're gonna spend some time getting to know them a little better, but have you got any plans in regards to the kids directly?
Well, as far as the possibility of adopting them, I've given that a lot of thought. I've reflected on that potential, and I don't think that I'm set up in my life to take them on full time. I just don't. I don't know how that would work. I mean, especially with the vocation that I've chosen, and some other life situations. I don't know that makes a lot of sense. But I certainly want to be connected to them, and so that to find ways to physically be there, to physically be around. Like, that's why I'm really eager to find work in Calgary and make sure that I'm legally cleared to work in Canada at any given time. Gives me opportunities to go visit, gives me opportunities, especially in the next few months, because this is not going to be a quick turnaround. It's not going to be by March or April they're into a permanent home. I anticipate it's going to take a little longer than that still. So what I want to do in the meantime is get there, is see them, is create opportunities for us to physically be in the same place. If we get their birth certificates and that gets sorted out, then I can bring them to Texas. I'd love to do that. It would be great to have them here on spring break.
Yeah,
spending a week here. It's I guess that right now for me, it's a situation of just wanting to have the communication with them and the updates. And in fact, I even contacted the school of the older four and said, "Hey, I'm here. If you need me, let me know. I'm here and I'm interested in their academic journeys." I contacted the school and contacted the school principal and said, "Just let me know." I also was put in touch with their therapist, I think, which could lead to some conversations about how they're doing, how they're handling things. I mean, the older two most likely remember the most about what life was like before foster care, and so they may have questions that need to get answered. And I'm very open. Like I'm treating them like a parent, like I'm a parent, but also treating them like I'm a sibling. So I talk to them, I communicate with them the same way I communicate with my daughter, which is very directly. Like I don't dumb it down. Like I don't simplify. Like I don't make it, It's not that it's not kid friendly, but it's definitely kid friendly. But it's very direct. I'm like very open about answering questions, about explaining things.
Yeah.
I come from a very different generation than they do, and I also wasn't raised in the same environment like they were raised. I mean, I was out of the care of, and I use that word loosely, out of the care of my biological father before I was 2. So I wasn't like them in that regard, where they were in the same home, so I can't answer questions like that.
Right.
But when they tell me things, I can respond. I can respond with a bit of insight, a bit of wisdom and insight about what might have happened, or what might have gone on before. But I did find something really interesting, is that we were at the Science Center, and this is one more moment for the movie. I'll say that, is that we were at the Science Center, and there is, in the Science Center in Calgary, there is a timeline upstairs that basically it says you can like put little cards on the timeline of what your earliest memory is.
Yeah.
For example, and the oldest one, she really struggled with that. I sat back and watched her struggle with trying to like place things on the timeline, and she's 12.
Yeah.
And she's looking back and she's like, I can't remember my earliest memory. I don't know when it was. And so that was very, it was a very quiet emotional moment for me to just sit there and observe her not having an idea in that moment of what her earliest memory was. Because that's one of those things where your entire life you're looking back at when you were 3 or 4, and remembering whatever you can remember. Maybe you were younger, maybe you were 2, but to sit there and think, she's only 12, and maybe she can't remember 9 years ago. Maybe the last decade is pretty foggy based on her experience in foster care in the last 3 years, and that's something that I definitely want to help her change.
Yeah, I mean, she would have lacked a lot of the stability that we mostly grew up with. So, and I know that even from my own personal experience, the years in which there was transition from the stable home life to more of a chaotic moving around. I don't have as many memories from those years, so could be hitting her like that.
Yeah, so it's sort of try to recreate those memories, or try to bring them back, to revive them in some way. I think will be an interesting task.
Well, it's an amazing story. I mean, you mentioned, we've joked about this a little, but you mentioned a couple of times like the idea of a movie or whatever. So you actually have connections that you could probably work on something like this. Do you have any plans to develop this story into something? Once it's resolved?
Once it's resolved, yeah. Well, I'm working on an outline right now to try to document what has been going on, the dates, the experiences. I don't think this will be hard for me to put into a script even. I can see this as a feature film. And, the big part is, how do you tell the story in the timeline, and along the timeline? Because, chronologically, in a linear fashion, you could say, okay, I can start when I was born, and I could continue on to when I met the kids. Yeah. But that may not be the most interesting structure. So I guess the challenge would be, what's the structure in telling this story that would be the most compelling to an audience?
Yeah.
Whether it was in a script or whether it was in a book. I mean, what would be the most interesting way to lay it out? And for me, I think it's that that first 10 minutes of the script where your protagonist is kind of clueless and living in their ordinary world, and suddenly 10 minutes into the movie is that discovery that you've got these siblings. And so it's really, I think you want to get to the point of the big change and how people respond to it. But honestly, if this was made into a movie, it's like they would want to doctor my response into being like resistant to it. Like, he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to face.
I don't know. Did you see there was a movie with Vince Vaughn where he was a sperm donor and had like hundreds of kids? Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
And that wasn't his reaction. His reaction was to jump in and take some ownership of it. So you never know. Maybe you can get Vince Vaughn to play you.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, I could start searching for who would play me in this story. That would be fun. That'd be a fun little thing to do. But I did set up a GoFundMe page that tells the story and shares updates with people, and people can comment obviously on those types of pages, and I more or less set it up because people were actually saying, well, can we do anything for them? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. Exactly. I mean, they're in foster care. They're being taken care of. They've got what they need, but then there's going to be other things they need along the way, especially when it comes to finding a permanent home and getting other maybe documents that they need, or any kind of travel. So if I want to bring them to Texas. So I started the GoFundMe page about a month ago, and a couple dozen people have contributed so far, and helped me spread the word, and that's been good. I've gotten some people that have opened up and told me stories about their experience as a foster parent, their experience as a foster child, their experience, as somebody who adopts a child, and so it's generated a lot of conversation with people that I just had no idea what their personal lives, looked like, and I like that it's opened some doors for understanding and more awareness of the fact that there's kids in foster care every day. There's probably some in foster care and within a 2 block radius of me right now, and that I wouldn't know about unless someone told me.
Yeah, yeah. It's an eye opening. It's definitely a change in perspective. So, okay, well, we hit our mark here, so I want to wrap things up. But this is an amazing story, and I think that people should definitely check out your GoFundMe page because it does give more details, and that's GoFundMe.com/7hearts.
It's GoFundMe.com/7hearts. That's right.
Okay, yeah. So definitely go check that out, and if you want to learn more about this specific story that Mark's dealing with and learning about and growing with, and if you want to maybe contribute a little there, you can leave your comments. But I'm going to be anxious to follow up on this. We may have to do another follow-up show at some point, Mark, just so that we can update people on how things are going, because I think this is something that my listeners will probably be interested in. This is a great story overall.
Well, and when I posted what I posted on Facebook, I mean, just briefly about the adventure along the way, I've gotten that kind of response, like keep it coming. Let us know what's going on. Keep us updated, and it's something that I find that people are investing in now. So that's good. That's good to hear, and it's also encouraging for me as I continue to move forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely check in, and I know you and I will keep talking too. So, if you again, I'm going to give that web address again. If you go to GoFundMe.com/7hearts, you can learn more about Mark's story, about the ongoing adventures of him learning more about these brothers and sisters he never knew he had, and you can also, if you want, I have a number or I have a means for you to leave a voicemail or an email, and you can ask me or Mark any questions you like. If you go to my website, kevintumlinson.com/podcast, and there's a button there for leaving a voicemail straight from your computer. Or you can have it call you back on your number, and you can leave a voicemail that way. Or if you're shy, you can just send me an email from that page. So, Mark, thanks a lot for being on the show, man. I'm going to be following this pretty closely. Kara and I are really interested, and I know my listeners will be too. So maybe you'll hear from some folks.
That sounds outstanding. I appreciate you giving me the time to talk.
You got it, man. We're going to have you back on again at some point. So. All right, take care, everybody. You're probably hearing music right now. Isn't that groovy? So we'll talk soon. Well, that was my friend Mark Isaacs, and that was an incredible story. I'm always floored. I've listened to it a couple times now. I've talked to Mark a few times about it, and it's amazing. I think the things that interest me most about that story, things like people just randomly connecting to him over it. The social worker in Canada, for example, who didn't think anything would come of this, and as it turns out, Mark was exactly the guy who needed to be brought into the loop. So, pretty amazing. And I'm very proud of my friend. I'm very pleased with everything that's happening for him there, and I wish him the best. I don't know what the story is with the GoFundMe, and please don't go check that out. I mean, I feel like I probably could have spent some time and edited that out, but I don't know. I'd like people to be able to see it because the story is there. But at any rate, I want to respect Mark's wishes on that. So. But you can check Mark out online at his IMDb page. If you search for him, you're going to find a few people. So what I've done is I've put a link in the show notes, and I did this in Bitly to make it easier because IMDb's got a lot of stuff. But if you go to imdb.to/1L1SHV0, don't worry, I put it in the notes. you can just click through. This week I'm doing some things a little different. For one, now you can actually call me. Call and leave a voicemail if you've got a question for me or Mark or any of my guests, any of my past guests or future guests. Give me a call at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9700. I'm sorry, 9673. Let me do that again without screwing it up. That's 281-809-9673. And that is a direct line to a voicemail that'll let you, chat me up, ask me anything you want, and I'll play those voicemails on air so that the whole world gets to hear your brilliance. So, and I'll answer any questions you send my way. And I hope you do call. I would love to start interacting more with the people listening to this show. I have been checking the numbers and they're going up, and I like that a lot. So what I'd like to ask is if you would, please go on iTunes and rate the show and write a comment, write a review to let people know what you think and let me know what you think, because I would love feedback. I'd love to know exactly how the show is doing, how it's hitting the mark as far as delivering the kind of stories that I wanted to deliver. The show has always been about connecting stories to the listener, inspiring people. It's literally the tagline of the show is how story shapes our culture, career, and lives. So I want to gauge how that's going. So please let me know on the voicemail line if you want. I'll play that on air. If you don't mind, you can say. Be sure to tell me when you call in, by the way, what your name is and where you're from, so that you can just give me a first name if you don't want to give your full name. But I just want to give credit where credit's due, and I also kind of want to hear where people are listening. So if you can't call in, you can still leave me a voicemail message. If you go to kevintumlinson.com/podcast, there's a little tab on the right-hand side of the page that will open up SpeakPipe, and it's very easy, actually. It gives you the steps right there, 1, 2, 3. Once you click that, a little pop-up comes up, and you can click record and talk directly into your computer and leave me the very same voicemail you would have left over the phone. So if you live outside the U.S. and you don't want to incur charges, just hop on over to my website, kevintumlinson.com/podcast, and leave me a voicemail right there. So there you go. 2 ways. You can also email me from that site. So if you don't dig the whole voicemail thing and you just want to send me an email, feel free. So I continue to work on refining this whole process. So keep an eye on that site, by the way. And I'm still working on the official website. I say I'm still working on it. It's there. It's waiting. I've got plans for it, but I've been sidetracked by a couple of other really big projects, some of which is my writing. So you really can't blame me for that, right? So, but you're very important to me, so I want to do everything I can to make this show everything it needs to be to help you out. Please subscribe. Please go on iTunes. I'm working on getting it on Stitcher. It's proven to be a little more complicated than I had anticipated. But if you go on my website, you can subscribe to the RSS feed through a link there. There's a little RSS button. And there's also a link for subscribing via email at the bottom of it. Probably, if you're listening to this on the web right now, it's at the bottom of the page, the actual podcast landing page that you're on. So where you see the show notes and everything. So that's it. I'm going to keep refining, keep working, and I hope you'll keep listening. So thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in. Thank you for sharing this with people. These stories are amazing to me. I hope they're amazing to you. They've been of huge inspiration in my life, and I look forward to more of them. I've got a goal this year of trying to hit every single week of the year. So, and I think it can be done. So, thanks a lot. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, by the way, hit me up. I'm looking for stories to tell. I've got lots of really interesting people lined up in the future. Next week, you're going to hear from cartoonist Johnny Kovalik, who is he's the brains behind Dork Tower, which is a very popular webcomic you can see online. Go check that out so you can get ready for a show. He's also the guy who drew the artwork for the Munchkins games and Apples to Apples and several games. He's very in tune with the gaming world. He's even created some games of his own. That's going to be a fantastic interview, so I hope you'll tune in. So take care, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. I'm very grateful for you. Have a wonderful year ahead, 2015. We just got through the first week of it, and it's been amazing so far. So I will talk to you soon.
Word Slinger.